Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
We talk about relationships here quite often, but not so much when it comes to relationships involving couples. And probably one of the harder relationship situations to navigate. And many times you can't do that alone because you got two different opinions. Sometimes you need an outside opinion. Sometimes you might need an opinion from a psychologist. And invariably, there should be therapy. Many of us believe even before the relationship begins deeply, there should be therapy to see where everybody's at. He helps so many couples and individuals navigate life through relationships and so much more. Dr. Roger Lavine is back with us today. Roger, welcome. How you doing?
I'm doing great, Steve. Yourself?
Very well, very well. And I'm glad we're talking about this today because I feel that it's not exposed enough in terms of relationships, dynamics between couples. Even in the last couple of years, I hear more and more of couples splitting, divorce rates escalating. I wonder if that's all because of COVID. Would you say that that has a lot to do with it?
Well, I think COVID definitely created a lot of new issues for relationships. What I've seen in my practice is many more people coming to me because of abuse. What happens is the abuse cycle and abuse in relationships, what happens is one of the party gets really under a lot of stress. And with COVID, people have had a lot more stress, and then they try to control in the relationship. And the more they try to control, of course, the more difficulty there is, and it ends up being in either emotional or physical abuse. So one of the things that couples need to look out for is stress really impacting our relationship? And if it is, not to make excuses for your partner, because that never turns out well, but to support your partner to get help to manage that stress.
What happens in counseling, and how do you deal with that if one member of the couple isn't so much on board with it?
Well, one of the things that, the first session in couples therapy should be basically thought of as a consultation, because usually there's one of the two that is more committed to the therapy than the other, or more committed to the relationship than the other. And that may not be the same, but commitment is required to make the work happen. So the first thing in therapy, that first session should be thought of as an interview of the therapist, and also as a goal setting exercise, so that at the end of that session, the couple can leave with a clear objective of what they're working on and something that both parties can commit to.
Yeah, I love the way you put that. It's the interview of the therapist or counselor. Because guess what, man? That came clear. You're the third part of the relationship. The couple collectively and individually have a relationship. I don't know if you can still hear me, Roger. Looks like
I can hear.
Oh,
I can
yeah,
hear you now.
Okay. Yeah. No, just saying it starts with a relationship. You are part of the relationship.
Yeah. I joined the relationship not as an umpire or referee, because sometimes people have the notion that this therapist is somehow going to be the judge or referee. But I joined the relationship to model how to communicate and how to work through difficult emotions. So some of the work, they'll be working with me till we get to the point where they can express themselves in a way that's constructive, because if the way they've been interacting just escalates, then they're not going to resolve anything. So basically, I'm a model there, help them work through their issues, maybe get to the point where they can communicate a little more effectively to their spouse, and also reflect back the patterns that they don't see in their own relationship that gets them to the escalation.
Now, you mentioned before, you said the word issues. What are some of the serious issues that you're confronting lately, or you have in the past, year, let's say that.
Well, the big issues that are really can be fatal for relationships, called the AAA, the either some form of addiction, and the number of people with the added stress of COVID started drinking more. They were home more, or they started using their medication inappropriately. So addiction is drug dependency has its big drain on relationships. Well, I talked a little bit about abuse, much more emotional abuse, as well as physical abuse because of the stress. And then, of course, affairs,
Mhm.
which you would think that with COVID, there'd be less affairs, but somehow human nature going all the way back to the Romans, affairs are there. And betrayal is a particularly difficult subject area because it really disturbs the other person's sense of reality. They trusted this person and they start questioning not only their current reality with this person, but has the past all been a lie? And it's
Hmm.
particularly disturbing.
Where do you go? Let's center on that. Where do you go with that thought? And secondly, if somebody has been unfaithful, has cheated, maybe in the relationship before the current one, and then they were caught cheating, let's say again, do you feel that they could do it again? People are maybe predispositioned, or their moral compass is very much skewed. What are your thoughts on all of that?
Well, I think that's one of the questions that the other party has to figure out. Is this person just fundamentally uh, malevolent? Are they really just a bad person, a bad character, or is there something else that can go on? Part of that reparation process to repair the relationship is for the party who betrayed to really dig deeply and figure out what was it about them that allowed them to act that way and hurt someone else. And in part of their communication to their spouse, if they're convincing enough, maybe the other party can give them another chance. But I'm also seeing other types of betrayal besides just affairs. You know, it can be pretty devastating financially if someone's gambling the finances away, or get rich schemes, or other types of betrayal where all of a sudden the security of the other person was undermined.
Yeah. And I guess betrayal is betrayal. Let's say you've all of your finances are within this couple, and now everything you've lived for, everything you've worked for together individually is now on the line because of somebody being dishonest. Um, that's a tough one. Yeah, I don't think of it in terms that way. Um, it's tough enough coming back from somebody who's cheated with somebody else, but coming back from the financial thing, when it's gone, it's gone. So getting that money back, in that situation is very challenging. It goes back to my thought before. Uh, People who are like that, do they kind of stay that way? In your experience, are they kind of wired that way? And many times it's hard to uh, see them not doing that, just repeated behavior, I guess.
Well, I think that's the age old question. Can and do people really change?
Sure. Yeah. What are your
And
thoughts?
well, I've seen it many times where people really do change. There's there's people that fundamentally their character, they're narcissistic, or they're uh, antisocial. They really have a deeply ingrained personality flaw. But more often than not, people have issues around feeling secure, communicating. I think there's very few people out there haven't experienced telling a white lie to begin with to avoid embarrassment or to not hurt somebody else's feelings. And then that dishonesty took on a life of its own. So that can happen in relationships. It starts out small, fear of confrontation, lack of, as you had said earlier, open and intimate communication. And then whatever the deceit takes on its own life and becomes so big, it's very hard for them to reconcile. Those people can change.
One more thought on all of this. Since we opened the can, so let's jump in just one more time. What if you are in a situation, doesn't even have to be a couple situation, could even be a friend, close friend, lifelong, whatever it might be. And you've trusted them forever, never had really any kind of inclination to think anything otherwise. And then they do something that is beyond even comprehension in terms of dishonesty. Did they change, or were they always that way?
Well, I think the real question has to come back. Why was I so blindly naive? Did I actually have some signal along the line that I chose to ignore?
Fair
Because
enough.
the bigger issue for the person who's been betrayed is how do I keep from this happening again? What about me allows this to happen? And I think that's one of the more challenging pieces of work now you're confronted with. If a friend betrays you and you had no inclination, it's like, what about you that wanted to blindly trust this person? And very few people who are have bad character, you can't see how they're treating other people or some dishonesty in other areas of their life if you're close to them. So the real question comes in, what is it about me that I didn't see this coming? Sometimes it truly is a surprise, but more often than not, we drove through the yield signs.
I agree with you on both points. Um, there's the situation where you might have saw the yield sign, but you just don't want to believe that you got a yield there. You're just going to keep driving. And then there's the others where it's complete like, what just happened? How is that even possible? Um, and for those times, you wonder, did somebody change? How did that even happen? Or was it always within them the entire time all along and it just surfaced? I wrestle with that. I talk with others about that. Um, Situations in lives, experiencing, both of those situations. But you wonder, did somebody change or were they always that way? Just deep inside and then it surfaced. Final thought, your thoughts on that overall.
Well, I think one of the things is, and this is true of any relationship, sometimes you grow together and sometimes you grow apart. Even in the big surprise, what happens is there was a loss of honest communication and intimate communication to know what was going on with the other person. So uh, you have to communicate and you have to be willing to challenge.
When you say challenge, you mean?
I mean, uh, when your intuition says something is different or something is wrong here, trust your gut. You asked 300 people, uh, have you ever trusted your gut and ignored it and felt better afterwards? You'll get almost zero number of people who say yes.
Uh 1000 billion% yes. I agree with you. Trust your gut. It knows. I am going to say, based on my life experience, even past number of years, I should have trusted my gut. Then there's other times where there was a complete surprise and my gut, it didn't even pick up on anything. If there was anything, it was maybe 2%, red light going off. In other situations, more like 40%. You should have you can't should on yourself. I don't know if you've heard that phrase. I should have
Right.
done this. I should have listened to my gut. But I guess it all comes down to being more aware of yourself and what yourself is trying to tell you. Because would you agree? You know the answer inside. You already got it knows.
In most cases, but
Okay.
there's always the surprise, and then in those cases, they're the ones that the reality is really shattered.
Agreed. When we talk about communication, what about if there is communication issues between two people?
Well, one of the things is that I've found is I use a little model that works really well with couples and allows them to do a much better job of problem solving pretty quickly. Uh, I'll get to that in a minute, but I think the first thing that people need to be aware of is that they bring their work thinking into their relationship. For example, some of the tougher clients that I have is two couples being married that are lawyers.
Okay. So two separate couples, they're
No,
both
two people who
are
are a couple who are lawyers. They're both lawyers
gotcha.
because they bring their pattern of work thinking into their home,
Mm,
and we all do, right? And of course, attorneys they're skilled at arguing and winning, but not so skilled at compromising or giving up the win. They'll redefine a win. But I think the challenge in problem solving for couples is it's a little different than most negotiations. In most negotiations, we try to come up with a compromise where people get kind of what they want and kind of not what they want. And you've heard the expression that a good compromise, nobody's happy, right? Well, the problem with a relationship is those compromises end up with resentments. So you have to stick in the problem solving longer until you come up with solutions that meet both parties' needs without a great deal of compromise. And of course, the problem with that is that it takes a lot of work to first understand the need and then secondly come up with a creative solution. And what
mm,
I found with most couples is that there's a person who processes really fast and someone who processes kind of slow. So what happens is the one that comes to the quick solutions all the time starts making all the decisions. And
mm.
of course, the other party, it's easier that way, right? Just let them make the decision. But quite often it comes again with a resentment. So over time, one party starts making most of the decisions while the other person's becoming more resentful. So the trick is to slow down that problem solving part of the process till they can come up with something that works to meet both parties' needs.
You make that very clear, and I can see that happening where one party is, one half of the couple comes up with answers. Yeah, we can do this. How about this? How about this? Where the other one is like still processing all of this. Wait, I need a moment. Um, and then invariably, with the one that's coming up with the solutions very quick, it's already there. So I guess they gravitate in that direction, and the resentment can totally be seen there. Is it the same? I know you deal with all different types of people on the planet, sports celebrities, who deal with their performance in their occupation, entrepreneurs, same-sex couples. What about there? LGBT. They have the same issues basically that everybody else has.
Well, they certainly have some of the same issues, and then they have their unique issues. But fundamentally, we all have the same emotions. And uh, if something is truly unique, then I would refer them to a therapist who handles those kind of couples. And there's all kinds of different situations, but more often than not, it's the same kind of communication, problem solving, sex, finance types of issues that we all wrestle with.
I'm hearing more and more of this just, and people talking about it, but relationships that are open, where the husband, the wife know that they're with other people, but they're still married and they're all good with all of that. Are you encountering more of that in the last, say, year or so?
I wouldn't say more in a year or so. I don't see enough to have data points for a trend,
Okay.
but certainly uh, those relationships are out there probably in much greater numbers than most people would imagine. And the same issues get a little more complex because now you have more parties,
Hmm.
uh, history added to the mix.
What would you say when dealing with couples and relationships for you as a psychologist? What do you think your biggest challenge is in working with people?
I think the biggest challenge, particularly with couples, is getting them to the point where they don't continue to escalate each other. By the time they get to my door, there's certain topics that they go right to rage and yelling at each other, right?
Hmm.
So teaching people how to uh, disagree in a fair way with respect is probably the biggest challenge when they haven't learned how to emotionally regulate well enough not to be so angry that they're saying things that they don't mean.
I would imagine it's a challenge for you sometimes where you don't want to be, but you're faced with the role of ref, the referee, where they want, you to take a side going back and forth. So I see that, can be a challenge in your world, because it finally somebody in the relationship may not have a voice like they want. And now when they're sitting with their other half before you, maybe they have that opportunity. Does that come up from time to time?
Well, I think uh, a well structured session creates the environment for the person that doesn't have the voice to say things they typically can't say. Um, and again, one of the things we have to teach couples, certain couples, is how to fight fair and how to
Hmm.
actually allow the other party to talk and show respect for that person's feelings and those kinds of things. Because uh, we tend subconsciously to model our relationship based upon what we saw as children, primarily our parents, right? So, depending upon how your father treated your mother or your mother treated your father, there may be a lot of pattern in there that needs to be pulled out.
Hmm. And is that something you do? Kind of, I don't want to call it a case history, but do you look back and ask the couples, either together or individually, tell me about your parents, that kind of thing? Is that very impactful?
There's a discipline, a part of couples therapy where we understand attachment because believe it or not, our expectations of our getting our needs met from others gets developed when we're an infant. So pretty much it's pretty true to form that based upon how you were parented will pretty much decide how you will act uh, in a relationship. Like if
Hmm.
your spouse is fiercely independent, right? Doesn't won't rely on you for anything, takes care of everything themselves, you'll find that they were a child of some parents that really didn't probably meet their needs, and that person had to learn how to meet their own needs all by themselves. And so now they're in a relationship with someone else and they're fiercely independent, which can create problems. You would
Sure.
think it would be a good thing, but everyone likes to feel they're needed. It's not taking the full advantage of the strengths of both parties if one is fiercely independent.
And I guess the same would be true is, let's say, hypothetical example, a woman is her father left when she was very young. And now she's into relationships and then doesn't feel like she's getting the attention in the relationships, even though she may be, but that's, on her. And she reacts accordingly in her mind. Let's say she cheats, whatever it might be. Have you seen that? And is it true? Somebody says, oh, she has daddy issues. Again, I'm just hypothetical here.
Well, I think everyone has parent issues. I even tell my own children that maturing is growing out of the limitation of your parents. So the point you bring up is, have we examined ourselves individually to figure out, what are the limitations that came from my childhood and matured past them? Because one of the problems with being in a relationship, depending upon your level of maturity, it's going to be like standing in front of a mirror for any of the issues you haven't dealt with from childhood.
If there's any takeaway today, that's it. I think that's so impactful, that because it all starts in your childhood, and then being mature enough to move past, or I guess maybe pick up where your parents left off, what they left you with. And they did the best they could with what they had and how they were parented generation before. Interesting way you put that, Roger. I think that's very insightful, what you just said. Thank you for that. If somebody wants to connect with you, let's say they're having relationship issues, whether it's couples or not, do you do a free consult?
Yes, we do.
Gotcha. What's your website?
It's Dr. Lavine, spelled out DoctorLavine.com.
I feel like
drlavine.com.
I feel like I'm in therapy right now. I'm in a session. Because you're so insightful and have just a real easy way about you, which is fantastic. Roger, thanks for all of it today. I appreciate you and appreciate you being here.
Have a great day.
Are you looking for even more of the podcasts and hosts that you love? The Podcast Business News Network is proud to announce that you now have even more ways to listen live. Check out the MyTuner Radio, online radio box, and Simple Radio apps on iOS and Android, or find us online. Search for Business News Network on mytuner-radio.com, or search Podcast Business News Network on streama.com and onlineradiobox.com/US. Take your podcast on the go and don't miss a minute of the action.
Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
For nearly 2,000 severely injured veterans, everyday life has become filled with barriers.
Day-to-day simple tasks can become pretty daunting.
I have to carry my chair up 2 flights of steps or have somebody do it for me.
What scares me the most is just the falling.
When I'm struggling with my house, I think, to have that one great barrier just knocked down, it's crucial.
Home for Our Troops is a wonderful nonprofit that builds a
mortgage-free, fully adaptive, handicap-accessible house.
And there's no catch.
It'll be our very first home that we've ever owned. This is a game changer.
This is where your life begins again.
We need you to join us in completing this important mission. Please visit hfotusa.org and help build homes and rebuild lives.
Because of you, everything's going to be okay.